I need to share something with you guys that happened to us. And honestly, I'm still processing it even though it's been 5 years. This story is about my autistic son. A custody battle that nearly destroyed us. And how we ended up having to flee our entire life to protect him from people who were supposed to love him. My son was 5 years old when he told me for the first time that he wished he was normal. But he didn't say that because he was having a bad day or feeling different. He said it because my brother-in-law Jared had just told him that normal boys don't cry at fireworks. That moment broke me. Despite my son being high-functioning autistic and cognitively brilliant, he already knew that he wasn't good enough for the people around us. The worst part, my own family was teaching him that. My wife had left when he was 4, and she blamed him for everything. She told our son, a 4-year-old child, that he was defective. After she left, her family started hovering over us like a pack of seagulls circling a dropped French fry. First came the unsolicited advice, then the surprise visits, then Jared started showing up more frequently. Jared would go, "You've got to toughen him up. He needs to learn to stop whining over stupid things like sound." What Jared didn't understand, what none of them understood, was that for my son's sudden loud noises weren't just annoying. They were physically painful, overwhelming his nervous system in ways that neurotypical people can't comprehend. But to them, his autism was just an excuse for bad behavior that I was too weak to correct. That's when the accidents started happening. The first incident happened when Jared offered to take my son for ice cream while I was at work. Behind more work. I was grateful. Single parenting is exhausting, and I thought maybe Jared was finally trying to bond with his nephew. 3 hours later, I got a call from a police officer. My son had been found alone at a playground 3 towns over, crying and asking for his dad. Jared claimed he'd lost track of time and thought my son was with another family at the park. The officer seemed suspicious, but there was no proof it was intentional. The real kicker, Jared had already called CPS before the police even contacted me. He told them I was neglectful and couldn't keep track of my own child. The case didn't stick. The timeline clearly showed Jared was responsible, but it planted a seed in my ex-in-law's minds. 2 weeks later, my ex-wife's parents filed for emergency custody, but they didn't use Jared's accident as evidence. Instead, they used my son's autistic behaviors as proof that I was abusing him. Their evidence. My son screaming during a thunderstorm was proof I was hurting him. My son biting a classmate when his sensory overload hit was proof I was teaching him violence was okay. My son's meltdowns in public were proof I couldn't handle parenting. It didn't matter that my son loved me so much. He jumped up and down hugging me every time I came home from work. It didn't matter that he was thriving academically, that his therapist praised our progress, that he was the happiest he'd ever been. All that mattered to them was taking him from me. They gathered screenshots, twisted narratives, and hired a sleazy lawyer who looked like he took pride in getting predators off the hook. All I had was my son and the truth. But as any parent who's dealt with family court knows, sometimes the truth isn't enough. When the trial date arrived, I knew the courtroom would overwhelm my son. So I did what I always did. I prepared him. We read court transcripts together, watched old proceedings online, and practiced with stuffed animals. I explained what custody meant, showed him breathing techniques for when it got too loud, and made sure he knew that I loved him more than anything in this world. My son, being the methodical kid he is, took notes in his blue notebook. He organized everything by importance using red stars for the most critical facts. He even packed exactly 7 books in his backpack in case we have to wait. On the morning of the trial, I found him already awake at 5 a.m., sitting cross-legged on his bed reviewing his notes by nightlight. He goes, "I'm organizing my thoughts by importance. Red stars are the most important facts." Looking back, I should have known he was planning something. My son doesn't just take notes, he builds cases. In the courtroom, the in-laws sat smugly. Jared actually winked at me like he'd already won. Their attorney painted me as negligent, even fabricating lies about me laying hands on my son. It was a nightmare. When he finished, the whole courtroom looked at me like I was a monster. I looked over at my son expecting him to be sad or nervous. Instead, he was angry, like he wasn't about to let someone lie about his dad. When he got called to the stand, I held my breath. My son walked to the witness stand clutching his blue notebook. The judge smiled kindly and told him to take his time. He opened to a page marked with red stars and began. "First fact. My mom left when I was 4 years, 2 months, and 15 days old. She said I was broken." My ex-wife flinched visibly. "Second fact. She never called me. Not on my birthday. Not on Christmas. Not ever." "Third fact. Dad never said bad things about her. He said she wasn't ready to be a mom and that it wasn't my fault." He continued methodically, but then he deviated from what we'd practiced. His voice got sharper, more confident. "That man was lying," he said, pointing at their attorney. "Never talk about my dad like that again. He never hit me. Hey, there I you. Oh, he loves me. Don me. You say, wow. What so ruining? When mom hit me, he stopped her. I love my dad so much. He never lets my peas touch my mashed potatoes. He puts labels on my bookshelf so I can find every story. He doesn't leave. Ever." The room went completely silent. I know Article 3 of the Family Code, my son added. It says the court wants what is best for me. And what is best for me is staying with my dad. Their lawyer tried to object, but the judge held up her hand. She goes, let him finish. Dad doesn't make me feel different like they do. My son said, pointing at Jared. He makes me feel normal, like I'm actually cool. I love him. I wiped my face. I hadn't cried since my wife left, but that day I couldn't stop, looking at my brilliant, brave son defending us both. But he wasn't done. I have one more thing, he said, pulling out a small recording device. Yesterday, Uncle Jared came to our house. The courtroom erupted when my son revealed the recording device. I had no idea he'd been documenting anything. He'd learned to be strategic on his own. He thought I was at school. My son explained calmly. But I had a stomach ache, so Dad let me stay home. I was in my room when Uncle Jared came to the back door. He was talking to someone on his phone. The judge listened to the recording through headphones. Her expression darkened as she heard Jared's voice clearly stating, "Once we get the kid, we'll make sure he never sees his father again. Maria just needs to play her part for a few more days." Jared stood up, red-faced, pointing at my son. He goes, "He's lying, I never..." The judge goes, "Sit down, sir." The recording was crystal clear. Jared had admitted their entire plan was to use my ex-wife to get custody, then cut me out completely. It wasn't about my son's well-being. It was about control and revenge. The judge ruled in our favor immediately. Full custody to me. No visitation rights for the in-laws. Jared stood up screaming, "This is a joke. You'll regret this. You think this ends here?" As they were escorted out, my ex-mother-in-law hissed, "You don't know what you've started." She was right. I didn't know what I'd started. But I was about to find out. After winning the custody battle, I dared to believe our lives might return to normal. My son and I slowly rebuilt our routine, managing his sensory needs and creating the stable, nurturing home he deserved. Every day felt like a step forward. But the threat from my ex-wife's family lurked like a shadow that refused to leave. At first they kept their distance, but gradually they started driving past our house more frequently. Jared's red truck would linger just long enough to remind us they were watching. I tried to shield my son, but his anxiety spiked every time he glimpsed that truck near his school or at the parks we visited. My son's once peaceful routines began fracturing under this calculated intimidation. Then my ex-wife Maria re-entered our lives, influenced heavily by her parents. They'd manipulated her guilt, convincing her she'd failed as a mother and needed to redeem herself by reclaiming custody. Driven by their pressure and desperate for their approval, she filed a new custody petition. Her parents hired expensive lawyers and experts, meticulously preparing a case designed to exploit my son's autistic behaviors against us. The harassment became methodical. Jared orchestrated encounters intended to unsettle my son, showing up unexpectedly at stores, at playgrounds, each incident precisely timed and documented. They twisted my son's legitimate anxiety-driven reactions into proof of neglect or emotional harm. What I didn't know was that they were also working behind the scenes at my son's school, encouraging misunderstandings and misrepresenting his sensory meltdowns. The more my son struggled publicly, the more ammunition they gained for court. But my brilliant son had begun his own quiet defense. Working with Dr. Chen, his therapist, he'd started documenting everything. The new hearing arrived too quickly. I woke before my alarm, heart racing. I found my son already awake, sitting cross-legged on his bed with his notebook, reviewing his organized thoughts under his nightlight. "I packed 7 books again," he said without looking up, "and I have new evidence." At the courthouse, Maria sat at the plaintiff's table, looking polished and maternal. Her parents flanked her, and Jared sat nearby with that same smirk. Their attorney presented Maria as a reformed mother who'd learned from her mistakes and deserved a second chance. Furthermore, their lawyer continued, "We have evidence that the child is suffering emotional distress in his current environment. The father has isolated him, creating an unhealthy dependency. The child exhibits extreme anxiety and has regressed development." They were using my son's autism against us again, framing his natural responses to their harassment as evidence of my failure. My attorney Patrick fought back, presenting documentation from Dr. Chen about my son's progress and the harassment timeline. But I could see the judge wavering. Maria looked sympathetic, reformed. Their case was compelling if you didn't know the whole truth. Then my son was called to testify again. He walked to the stand with his notebook and that same determined expression. But this time, he had more than just testimony. "I brought new evidence," my son announced, pulling out his recording device again. "Dr. Chen says documentation is important for analysis." The recording he played was devastating. It captured Jared coaching Maria before a supervised visit. "Remember, act sad when he talks about his dad. Make it seem like he's been turned against you. And if he has a meltdown, don't comfort him. Little lie everyone see how damaged he is." The judge's expression turned to stone as she listened. When the recording ended, she looked directly at Maria's family. "This court finds a pattern of manipulation, harassment, and exploitation of a child's disability for personal gain," she declared. I'm issuing permanent restraining orders and ordering a criminal investigation. Maria's face crumpled as she realized she'd been used. Her parents looked panicked. Jared was escorted out in handcuffs. But as we left the courthouse, I knew this wasn't over. My ex-mother-in-law's earlier words echoed in my mind. You don't know what you've started. That night I made a decision that would change our lives forever. We couldn't stay and wait for their next move. We had to disappear. I spent the weekend packing our essential belongings while explaining to my son that we needed to move for safety reasons. He approached the task with his usual methodical precision, categorizing his books and making lists. Can we visit the library one more time? He asked, to say goodbye to Miss Eden. Miss Eden, the children's librarian, fought back tears as my son handed in his punch card with 11 stamps. I need 12 for a free book, he explained. But we're moving for safety. She disappeared into the back room and returned with a brand new copy of the Ultimate Space Encyclopedia. Consider this your free book, she said. Some things are more important than stamps. Our last stop was Dr. Chen's office. She agreed to meet us on her day off to provide referrals to trusted colleagues in different cities, so no one would know our actual destination. Remember what we've practiced, she told my son. When you feel overwhelmed, identify the trigger, implement coping strategy, communicate needs. The morning we left, I found a drawing taped to my son's bedroom wall. A picture of our house with 2 stick figures standing outside. Underneath, in his careful handwriting, our first home where Dad taught me I'm not broken. I carefully removed it and placed it in my wallet. Before leaving town, we made one final stop at an unmarked office building. Inside, a former police detective named Diane handed me a sealed envelope containing our new identities. Driver's licenses, social security cards, bank accounts, everything we needed to disappear. We'll monitor any searches for your old names, she explained. If they start getting close, you'll know before they do. In the car, my son barely looked up from his spacebook. Did you get the documents? He asked. All set. Ready for our big adventure. I calculated that we lived in our house for 2,347 days, he said quietly. That's a lot of days. It is. Been fun and odd. I agreed. But we'll have even more days in our new home. We drove for hours, my son documenting everything in his notebook. License plates from different states, cloud types, exact mileage between rest stops. Around hour 6, he asked, are we changing our names like in witness protection shows? I nearly swerved. Have you been watching those? He shrugged. They're procedural. Very interesting. No point lying. He'd figure it out. Yes, we're changing our last name to make it harder for certain people to find us. Good, he said. I've been thinking about names. I like Chen like Dr. Chen, or Walker. Walker it is. I said, we're the Walkers now. He tested it out. Walker. It sounds like we're always moving. Good for hiding. We reached our destination late that night. A small city far enough away to feel safe. The furnished apartment was small but clean, with roof access as promised. My son immediately claimed the smaller bedroom with built-in bookshelves. This is acceptable, he declared after inspection. The shelves need labels though. We'll get on that tomorrow. That first night, every unfamiliar sound jolted me awake. But morning came without incident, and then another and another. Slowly, we built a new routine. I found remote work as a technical writer. We found Dr. Ramirez, who specialized in autism and trauma DOT. The local school had excellent special education support. My son adapted remarkably well, mapping our new neighborhood with precision and making a friend named Zoe, who shared his interest in astronomy. Zoe says I talk like a professor. He told me one evening sounding pleased. She says it's cool. It is cool. I agreed. You're cool. 3 months in, I received the first alert from Diane. Jared had been questioning my former colleagues, but the trail was cold. A month later, Maria's parents hired a private investigator who tracked us to the state line before losing us. Each alert spiked my anxiety, but our precautions held. We were ghosts now. 2 years into our new life, we received an unexpected package forwarded through Patrick's office. Inside was a letter from Maria and a small blue box containing a meteorite fragment with authentication papers. I remembered he loved space, she wrote. I've been in therapy confronting what my parents did. The guilt I carry for abandoning my son. I don't ask to see him or know where you are. I just want you both to know I'm sorry, and I hope you're happy and safe. I debated showing this to my son, but he deserved to make his own choices. He read the letter carefully, examined the meteorite, then placed it on his desk with his other space treasures. It's a chondrite, he said. Probably from the asteroid belt, very old. What do you want to do about it? I want to keep it for my collection, but I don't want to write back. Not yet. That's completely fine. Maybe someday when I'm older, he added, to ask questions about space rocks. Whenever you're ready, no rush. 3 years after our escape, we learned that my ex-father-in-law had passed away from a heart attack. Jared was still in prison for fraud. Apparently his investment scam had nothing to do with us, but karma found him anyway. The grandmother had moved to a retirement community in Florida. Maria was working as a teacher's aide in another state. The threat that had loomed over us was finally truly gone. That night, I found my son on the roof deck with his telescope. "Dad," he said, "I've been thinking about our old house. I can't remember what it looked like anymore. Not exactly." I pulled out the drawing he'd made, the one I'd kept in my wallet for 3 years. "You kept it?" he asked, eyes widening. "Of course. Some things are worth remembering." He studied the drawing, tracing the lines with his finger. "Can we put this in a frame for my room?" "Absolutely." After a moment, he said, "I'm glad we moved here, even though it was scary at first." "Me too, buddy. It was worth it." 5 years after fleeing our old life, we celebrated with a camping trip to a dark sky preserve. My son, now 10, set up his telescope with practiced ease, consulting star charts and making notes in his latest blue notebook. As we sat by the campfire, he suddenly asked, "Do you ever miss our old life?" I considered the question. "I miss some things, some people, but I don't miss the fear." He nodded thoughtfully. "I used to be afraid all the time. I didn't even realize it until we moved, and I stopped feeling that way." "And how do you feel now?" He looked up at the stars, face illuminated by firelight. "Safe," he said simply, "and not broken, never broken." I put my arm around his shoulders, and for once he didn't pull away. "That's all I ever wanted for you." We sat in comfortable silence, watching the embers dance like distant stars. The past couldn't touch us anymore. We'd outrun it, outlasted it, outgrown it. So here we are, 5 years later. My son is thriving, honor roll student, junior astronomer, the most resilient kid I know. We found a house with a fenced backyard, and that promised rooftop deck. He's got his telescope, his books organized with meticulous labels, and friends who think his professor talk is awesome. The legal system failed us initially, but it also ultimately protected us. My son's own intelligence and Dr. Chen's guidance taught him to document everything, which saved us both times. Sometimes the smallest voices carry the most truth. To any parent dealing with family court and a special needs child, document everything. Prepare your child as much as possible, and trust that their authenticity will shine through. My son's matter-of-fact honesty and emotional intelligence were our strongest weapons against their lies. To anyone whose family weaponizes a child's disability, you're not just hurting that child, you're revealing exactly who you are. My son learned that he wasn't broken despite their efforts, not because of them. The hardest part wasn't leaving everything behind or changing our names. It was realizing that sometimes the people who should love and protect your child are the ones you need protection from. But here's what I learned. Family isn't just blood. It's the people who see your child as perfect exactly as they are. We're still the walkers. We still stargaze from our rooftop deck. My son still organizes everything with color-coded precision and asks questions that make me think. The difference is, now he does it all without fear. And yes, he kept that meteorite from his mother. It sits on his desk next to a photo of us at the dark sky preserve and his original drawing of our first house. Some things are worth remembering, even the painful ones. They remind us how far we've come,